that I've been given to speak on is divine compassion. Now, we would all like to feel that we are compassionate, that we would help someone in distress. At the same time, it could be said that many people feel that they have to push on the duties of their own life and have to be careful how considerate they are of others. In other words, the popular conception is there that you can only care so much. And that so much, of course, is subject to arbitration and it's different for each person. Because like if you say, simple linear, that means different things to different people. Some people think it means having one huge widescreen TV instead of one TV in every room. Simple linear. So, compassion. Some people think it means, well, helping an elderly lady to cross the street, and that's fine. Others think it means that when someone is going through some crisis, you should try to help the person. So there are these different conceptions of compassion. How much does compassion apply to our life? Most of you are working with families, and naturally the tendency is to think, my cup of concerns and ability to care is full. The amazing thing about bhakti is that it constantly widens your arena of compassion. For a true bhakti yogi, the outpouring of compassion is never fixed. It's always increasing. That example, of course, is set by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, whose compassion has no bounds. If you study Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, you'll find that, as we mentioned yesterday at the initiation yoga, Lord Chaitanya was speaking to all kinds of persons, even persons from other parts of the universe came to see him disguised as human beings. He spoke to leaders of all prominent sampradayas, and also, as he walked through Jarikanda forest on the way to Vrindavan, he had the animals dancing in ecstasy. And even animals that normally were enemies to one another, they would be embracing and kissing each other. So, when we look at the compassion of Lord Chaitanya, we find no limitation. We need to move toward that goal of ever-increasing compassion, always widening the boundaries of what we think compassion is in terms of how our life shows it. That is enlivening. Just think, instead of having a fixed conception of compassion, we can look forward to a Krishna-conscious lifestyle in which the compassion ever increases. It widens. You see more and more opportunities to show compassion. But please think about that. People are accustomed to think about boundless wealth. What about boundless compassion? Everyone is so concerned in material society about the economy. How's the economy doing? The housing market is coming to life. Oh my goodness. Growth could be just around the corner again. You're taught to worship at the deity of growth. Offer flowers at the lotus feet of growth. There's one prominent behavioral economic theory that in order for people to be good and to act with compassion and integrity, first there must be economic growth. It is economic growth that allows people the luxury of caring for others. In other words, caring for others and compassion is like, having a Mercedes or a Lexus or maybe like a Bentley. Some of you have Mercedes and Lexus, so we'll move up to Bentley. So you get the point. So, when seen through this lens, compassion indeed is a luxury item which requires first that there's economic growth, which is achieved by any means necessary. And once the economic growth is there, then you can sit back and be able to consider others and care for others. You've seen that, haven't you? There was another economic theory, no longer believed in, that when people become rich enough, then suddenly money won't mean anything to them. If their wealth gets to a certain threshold, then people will no longer be interested in accumulating more wealth, and instead they'll devote all their time to philanthropic and charitable activity. You've seen that on a mass scale, right? Obviously it doesn't work in a society where no one is taught to control their mind and senses. A consumerist society is based on ever-increasing material desire. So that particular theory is no longer believed in. But still, there is this idea that how do you expect people to care for their neighbor, to love one another, if they still have an appetite for economic growth? So therefore, the first thing necessary for a civilized society, the first thing necessary for world peace, and the first thing necessary for inner tranquility is economic growth. What do you think? You would never say anything like that, right? First comes our bhakti, right? Gita. All right. Compassion. As you know, Rupa Goswami has stated, Namo Mahabhavinaya Krishna Prema Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya. There's never, ever been, and will never be anyone as compassionate as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In order to appreciate that statement, we need to understand the true identity of the living entity. Not just the human being, but the true identity of all living entities. If we are the body and mind, then it is true that compassion to the body and mind becomes most important. But if we are not the body and mind, and we are spirit soul, then compassion for the spirit soul becomes most important. That doesn't mean we cannot appreciate those who help us care for our bodies and minds. If I'm sick, for example, and I go to a doctor, and the doctor heals me, what do you think I'm going to tell him? Well, it's no big deal. I'm not the body anyway. Of course I'm not going to say that. I will thank the doctor, but I will understand the doctor has not solved my real problems in life. That's the thing. So we need to see everything in perspective. What is the priority? What is secondary? What is tertiary? Bhakti is about prioritization. It's not about excluding something completely. It's about putting everything in the proper place. It's very wonderful that you gathered here at Gita Farm. And it's an opportunity for you to expand your compassion. Let me ask you a question. How many of you have been observing the cows? How beautiful they are. Raise your hands, please. Yes. Srila Prabhupada had a deep desire for cows to be protected. And that there be Krishna conscious farms that would supply the temples and restaurants and centers in the city with milk from protected cows. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the dairy industry. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the horrible agonies that cows and bulls go through. It does seem so easy, right, to go to the shop and buy milk, yes? And what does that have to do with compassion? The milk is there in the shop, you pay your money, you didn't kill the cow, right? We don't have any cow killers in this room. So that should be the end of the matter, right? What do you think? But we find that more and more people are waking up to the realities of animal slaughter and the dairy industry. The two are hand in hand together. If you go talk to any farmer in this area about protecting cows, they'll look at you like you're crazy. Why is that? Is it because they simply like to kill? No, it's because it makes no economic sense to their mindset. What do you do when bulls are born? They don't give dairy products. And you're going to pay to maintain a bull? When the bull is not giving you any milk? What do you do with cows when they get old? You're going to pay to maintain an old cow? Not simply when the cows get old, but what about when the cows their milk production drops? They're still giving milk, but it drops. You're going to pay for all that? This is nuts. You'll never make a profit. You'll starve. But we feel that it's not necessary for us to think about all that when we purchase milk. Because we want milk. Milk is part of the bhakti lifestyle. Indeed, there has been several places, not just one case, but there has been scientific research done in the USA and in Australia, which has found that those who drink milk regularly have a higher cognitive ability. You may have read in Srimad Bhagavatam that milk is a miracle food. Prabhupada writes that it's necessary for developing finer tissues in the brain which can understand spiritual thought. So you might have thought, well, it's kind of a nice Hindu granny folklore. Now even scientific research is backing this up. That those who drink milk, their cognitive functions are there. But at the same time, we look with compassion at where our milk is coming from, and if we think about it, it's horrible. But what to do? Now sometimes it's said that Srila Prabhupada tolerated store-bought milk. If you want to go back to the early days of ISKCON when Srila Prabhupada was trying to get things going, you would see, yes. But at the same time, he always said, look, protect the cows, get milk from protected cows. So if we want to quote Srila Prabhupada's example, we have to give both sides of the coin, not just one side. Then the statement is made, well, if we're going to be truly compassionate like that, it's going to be very expensive for milk. Sometimes estimate is given that milk from protected cows would cost 5 times as much as what you pay at the supermarket. Because milk from protected cows means you're paying to maintain the old cows, you're paying to maintain the bulls. All that's factored into the price of protected milk. So he said, oh no, we can't. Our family can't do that. Let me ask you this. How many have stopped driving because of the price of gasoline? Oh no, gasoline must have gasoline. That's a necessity. But milk is also a necessity, so why then we say, well, no, we cannot spend, right? The price of milk is so high. It's all about economics, not so much about compassion. This is unconsciously how we're looking at the situation. And more you'll find that people are not becoming vegetarians anymore. They're moving straight from meat eating to veganism. If you look on Amazon.com, all the best-selling non-meat cookbooks are vegan. Because people are thinking, they're becoming aware that this animal slaughter and this dairy milk is just horrible. Ethically, they can't take part in it. So what are we to do? I was discussing with my brother Shesha Babu and some others about a first instruction that Prabhupada gave for the first devotee who went to New Zealand to start the Krishna Conscious Society. And Prabhupada was aware, you may not be aware, but Prabhupada was certainly aware, because India was full of first-class ghee from New Zealand. So Prabhupada was aware that this is the first-class dairy country in the world, renowned for its milk products and its agriculture. So he told the first devotee who went there, when you go there, don't start a temple in the city. Get a farm. But it turned out that devotees, they couldn't understand Prabhupada's advanced vision. They were thinking, well, we're Hare Krishnas, that means a temple in the city. So they never got a farm at a time when land prices were so low. Now the land prices there are astronomical. A place like this over there would cost minimum $10 million, not including the buildings. Because all the cows there are grass-fed, and that makes their milk very tasty. They eat grass year-round. And the meat eaters claim, I wouldn't know, but the meat eaters claim that the grass-fed beef is very exquisite. So, here we have Prabhupada giving instructions that are apparently ahead of the time. And what are we to do now in our time? Can we really feel compassionate knowing that we are participating in the conspiracy of animal slaughter by supporting the dairy industry and its horrible treatment of cows and bulls and calves? So in other words, what is the difference between the dairy industry and the slaughterhouse? Simply a matter of time. That's the only difference. Here at Devotees, based on a limited staff, limited resources, the devotees are trying to develop a supply of milk from protected cows. When Srila Prabhupada toured Devotees, he would always comment when he would go back to India. He would tell in India, oh, our cows at Devotees are getting so much milk. So my point in bringing this up is that as we mature in bhakti, we want our compassion to expand. We don't want to look hypocritical. We want to act with integrity. So this is a very, very deep issue that we should be facing. And all of you are very thoughtful persons. On the one hand, milk is an essential part of our lifestyle. On the other hand, where does the milk come from and how? It's a real thorough and complete way. I myself spend a lot of time in reaching out to young people today. Young means under the age of 30, 35. And this is a big issue. How can you, people who love the cows and worshiping Govinda, how can you support the dairy industry? Especially when the product that they call milk in the supermarket has been doctored so much. And then when you take into account where the milk comes from and how. This requires our compassion. We need to think about how to deal with this, because undeniably, milk is a part of our lifestyle. Yet when we look at where the milk comes from, and how, and when we look at the so-called milk that is sold in the shops, we realize that something is terribly wrong. So I'd like, while you're here, that all of you go look at the cows and study them. The Bhagavatam says that one can develop religious principles just by being around cows. They're so patient, they're so calm and peaceful. So a limited conception of compassion would allow us to say, I don't kill cows, so therefore. But as the Krishna conscious society matures, our compassion should also mature. In other words, you don't expect the compassion of a 40-year-old person to be the same as the compassion of a 5-year-old person. A 5-year-old child can only see so far in terms of compassion. Don't hurt my mother, don't hurt my little brother. But as you mature, as you grow up, your compassion starts to increase. You start becoming considerate of other people. And then you start to become considerate of all living entities. Because that's what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. Sarvayoni Shukontya, Murtya Sambhavantya. I'm the seed-giving father of all living entities. And we know from reading Bhagavatam what are the two pillars of a real civilized society. Namo Brahmanya Devaya, Go Brahmanya Hitaya. Brahminical culture and cow protection. We have neither in human society today. Does that mean we are powerless? We can't do anything about it? The situation requires the application of our determined compassion. I'll give you one small example from another part of the world. Devotees came to the conclusion that no longer did they want to rely on milk from the dairy industry. So they took that position. Their centers, their outreach centers took that position. If we can't have milk from protected cows, we're not using milk. So that was their particular stance, and some devotees thought, oh, this is very extreme. Prabhupada never did that. Although Prabhupada always said, get milk from protected cows. So this went on for some years. No one was using milk in their homes or at the centers because we didn't have any milk from protected cows. So everyone said, it's either that or none. So what happened after some years? If you were a Vaishya, what would you start thinking? If you were a smart businessman, what would you start thinking? Huh? There's a market here. I know, some of you here are very expert Vaishyas. Wait a minute. Slaughterhouse milk has been blasting right, left, and center. No one's buying it anymore. If I, as a business person, get some land and start keeping cows, I got a captive market. That's exactly what happened. Some enterprising grihastas got some land and started keeping cows, and because they had hundreds of devotees who weren't buying any milk. So the Krishna conscious Vaishyas came along and said, okay, we'll provide some protected milk for you. And of course they had a captive market, they had a monopoly. Businessmen love monopolies. So it's just an example of one way the situation developed. So now, the devotees in that particular area have milk from protected cows. Yes, they pay more for it than in the store, but they're paying the real cost. Why, in other words, should we feel good about getting cheap doctored milk at the supermarket when the low cost is all based on slaughter? Because we don't have to take care of the old cows and bulls, we don't have to take care of any bulls, we don't even have to take care of cows with lowering production. Our costs are lower. We kill them and sell the meat, and therefore we can charge you a very low price. Isn't that wonderful? And you will appreciate when you go to the supermarket and pay how much for a quart of milk? $3. Don't you appreciate that cheap price? That's the main thing. As one famous social commentator said, these days everyone knows the price of everything and the value of nothing. Everyone's so price conscious, but they don't understand the value of the human form of life. They don't understand the value of other life forms. Just what is the price? What is the price? You're offering me protected milk for $6 a quart? Oh, that doesn't make any economic sense. So, these are things that we should think about in our compassion. Because there's no doubt that milk is valued in bhakti culture. But then again, we have this horrible reality. What to do as servants of Lord Chaitanya? It's not convenient to think about these things, no doubt. But after all, you didn't kill the cow, right? You would never think of doing that. But the milk is there, and you got to get on with your life, right? You got to get on with our life. So we need the best brains, the best business persons, the best ethical philosophers to examine these issues. It's true that in the beginning of this time, when Prabhupada was with us, he tolerated this store-bought milk, while at the same time always speaking about the horrors of cow slaughter and the need for cow protection. So we need to look at the issue with developed intelligence. I think that is the theme of my humble attempt at a presentation on divine compassion, is that compassion is ever expanding. It's not something fixed, constrained by a box. Again, the example, your compassion when you were 5 years old might just have extended to feeling sorry for another kid when the other kid broke his or her toy. You felt bad for the little child. That could have been the extent of your compassion. But now, you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, and you have a much wider sense of compassion about the suffering of human beings and the suffering of animals. But how far does that compassion about the suffering of all living entities go? It should be expanding, because Lord Chaitanya's compassion is ever expanding. We read in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita that the more the Panchatattva dance, the more the flood of love of Krishna increases, ever expanding, nothing fixed and static. We read in Chaitanya Charitamrita that the Panchatattva would plunder the storehouse of love of Krishna and distribute the contents. And the more they plundered and distributed, the more the supply increased. So this is bhakti. So similarly with our compassion. We want to taste real compassion, and that is something that's ever expanding. Just like the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, Srinivasa Acharya writes in his Sadgoswami Ashtakam that the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan were always expanding the limits of the ocean of transcendental bliss. Anandam Purivardhanaikanikalam. Everything in bhakti is ever increasing in potency, expanding the limits. I remember here, Srila Prabhupada came to Atlanta, Georgia in 1975. I think I met yesterday one devotee from Atlanta. So, the devotees decided to put on a drama for Prabhupada about Lord Chaitanya and the Chandkazi, a popular scene. And the ritualistic Hindus, they went to the Chandkazi, to protest about Mahaprabhu, that his kirtan was disturbing their peace and ruining the Hindu religion because Mahaprabhu was making it so that anyone from any caste could say the holy name. And this is a great offense. These sacred rituals should only be the property of the caste brahmanas. But Lord Chaitanya was freely distributing the holy name, chanting it in Harinam Sankirtan in public. So the caste Hindus thought this is blasphemy. So they actually went to the Chandkazi, the Muslim ruler, to complain. You must do something. And so they, as their final conclusive point against Lord Chaitanya, they told the Chandkazi that, don't you know, if you chant the Hare Krishna mantra in public, the potency will reduce. So as soon as they said that in the play, Prabhupada broke into the play, he leaned into his microphone and said, potency has already increased. Because he said Hare Krishna. That is spiritual vision. The caste Hindu said, if the Hare Krishna mantra was chanted publicly, his potency would go down. Prabhupada heard. They said, Hare Krishna, potency has already increased. This is bhakti. And we should think about that in terms of our own chanting, of course. I think Shesha Prabhu this morning was describing how, quoting His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, who said, if you don't see a miracle every day in your bhakti life, then you're not seeing properly. Every day is a chance for further spiritual insight, spiritual growth. Why should we make tomorrow like it was 10 years ago? Everyone likes growth, but all they think about is economic growth. And that has destroyed the planet. Real growth means spiritual growth, and that has no destructive aspects to it. So we are growth orientated, but we understand what is healthy growth, what is real growth. We want our compassion to grow. But what is the usual caveat, the usual obstacle? Just like when it comes to curbing economic growth so the earth is not destroyed, What's the obstacle usually presented? But we don't want our nation's standard of living to drop. In the 1990s, there was one president of the USA, and that was his response to any attempt for environmental regulation. I will never let America become a third world nation. We're not stopping economic growth for anything. Forget this environmental buoy. So now, there's always a deadlock when nations of the world consider how to handle economic growth. India's population, China's population is exploding. So the first world countries tell India and China, you've got to slow down your growth. And what does India and China say? Hey, look, you've been partying for a long time. We just arrived. You stop. Why are you telling us to stop? You already had your chance to destroy everything. Now it's our turn. So everyone's pointing and he's like, you stop. No, you stop first. No, you stop. You cut back. No, 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 no. We haven't had our chance. You had your chance. So there's always some imaginary practical consideration, even though those considerations are against your own well-being. So similarly, when it comes to compassion about milk, we come up with some reason. Well, economics, it's just not possible, it doesn't work for us. For my family, it just doesn't calculate, Look, I go to the temple, I put something in the hundi, that's my ethics. I give donation for Janmashtami, those are my ethics. What more do you want? I'm a working man, working woman, I have children to put through university. What more do you want to have? I'm at the limits of my compassion already. Just by listening to you, Swami. We come here not to think about all these things. We came here to your lecture to hear about divine compassion, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, mercy to the most fallen, and now we get a lecture about cows and milk. But I ask you to consider this in terms of spiritual life, the internal potency of Krishna, which does not operate according to the laws of time and space. That's why you can never understand Vrindavan if you apply laws of ordinary geography and physics. How did Krishna fit so many cows into Vrindavan? How did Krishna have so many cowherd boyfriends? But Krishna is not bound by laws of time and space, and neither is bhakti. That's why in Bhagavad Gita Krishna says, just a little advance in bhakti prevents you from the greatest danger. Just one little bit can do so much. But that doesn't mean we should keep that a little bit, just because one little bit will protect you from the greatest fear of losing a human form of life. Out of love for Krishna, we want things to expand. One Srila Prabhupada commented that devotees are the greatest opportunists. We have to see an opportunity for increasing our service to Krishna. That means there'll be things we see now that we didn't see 5 years ago. You know the Bengali proverb Srila Prabhupada would always quote. Just because I ran naked when I was a 3-year-old child, does that mean I should do that as an adult? It's expected that we grow up. So similarly, as we advance in bhakti, both as days, opportunities for serving Krishna better than what we saw before. This is what's exciting about bhakti. When you say that Krishna is Navayoganam, ever fresh, ever youthful, so is Krishna's service. In Srimad Bhagavatam, in the 4th canto, there's a very interesting point in one purport, that it's the super soul in the heart of the devotee that allows the devotee's vision to see ever fresh and new opportunities for serving. That means a devotee can be in the same physical circumstances, the same place, year after year, decade after decade, and we'll see newer and newer opportunities for spiritual advancement, service to Krishna, giving Krishna pleasure. I have one godbrother, Yamaraj Das, who works for Bhakti Godhead magazine. He has been doing the same service for 40 years. In terms of layout and design, the way he did his service changed from the way you did graphics and layout of the printed page in the 70s. Now it's computerized, but still it's the same basic service for over 40 years. Now, is he seeing everything exactly the same as in the 70s? No, his spiritual vision keeps increasing and increasing, especially because of his determined and dedicated devotional service. The bliss of such a weekend as this is that we get new insights for serving Krishna and how we can improve our spiritual life. Just like when business persons get together, they are, especially salespersons, they're very happy because we'll get some new tips, we'll get some new insights on how to sell more, how to increase the profits. Well, devotees are also like that, in that by coming together, we get fresh and deeper insights, how to chant Hare Krishna, how to serve Krishna without material motivation, how to arrange our bhakti lifestyle. It's exciting. We see newer and newer aspects and insights. This morning, Shri Prabhu was telling us about Bhagavatam, the literary incarnation of Krishna. I like the way Prabhupada explained about how to read his books. He said, read them every day, all your life, and you'll always see newer and newer lights. Our whole bhakti experience is like that. And this is the advantage of connecting to the Guru Parampara. You have official access to the ever-fresh, ever-new experience of bhakti. If you are an unenrolled student, you'll definitely get some benefit. But when you formally enroll, the benefits you get are more. So we never say that, for example, someone who has not officially connected to the Guru Parampara has no value and is getting no benefit. We never say that. Someone who says Hare Krishna once is getting incalculable benefit. Nevertheless, if we connect to the Guru Parampara, we're taking advantage of all the mercy that's available for us. And that mercy allows us to be more compassionate. Which brings me to another point. To actually be compassionate takes spiritual strength. This was Krishna's criticism of Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna was being compassionate, but Krishna wanted the compassion on a higher level and a deeper level. Therefore, Krishna chastised him. Not that Krishna was against caring for one's friends, relatives, and former teachers. No, that was not the point. And you know, sometimes people make that mistake when they read Bhagavad Gita, especially when commented upon by persons who don't know Krishna sufficiently through discipleship session, it seems like, what is Krishna doing? Arjuna, he would win the Nobel Peace Prize based on his position in chapter 1. And then, in chapter 2, you got Krishna ruining everything. You're speaking big words, but you're a fool. So, Krishna is provoking us. As a Supreme Personality of God, he knows how to be provocative. Just think. Isn't Krishna smart enough to know that if he didn't speak Bhagavad Gita on a battlefield, it would be more palatable for people? Some people. But Krishna chose the most provocative circumstances to get us to think. Pragyavanam Savasa said, Arjuna, you're speaking words that seem very big, sociological, and learned, but someone who actually is intelligent doesn't speak like that. That was an indirect way, Prabhupada, of saying, you're speaking like a fool. So, Krishna was not negating care for one's family, for one's friends, respect for one's teachers, but he was emphasizing priority. After all, Krishna is the Supreme Soul. He's there with Arjuna. Krishna is Dharma himself. He doesn't need Arjuna to lecture him on Dharma. Like when he was Dharma personified. So Krishna wanted to establish that point clearly. Therefore, he arranged that Arjuna would fall into Maya for our benefit. He even smiled. In the first chapter, you remember when Krishna drove Arjuna in between the two armies. And then he smiled. Why? It takes someone who knows Krishna to know why he smiles. Prabhupada explains, Krishna was smiling because he's thinking, just see the power of my Maya. Arjuna's right here on the chariot with me, and he's still falling into Maya. How amazing is my Maya? So Krishna is pushing for a deeper understanding of compassion. Compassion with much more integrity than the average person today would ordinarily understand. So as Bhagavad Gita in one purport tells us, compassion for the spirit soul is self-realization. So that's the point Krishna wanted to make clear. So just like in Bhagavad Gita, our understanding of compassion expands. In the beginning, we were probably siding with Arjuna. Maybe we have some readers here. When you first read Bhagavad Gita and you read about Arjuna's objection, you were thinking, yes, he's right. And then you get to chapter 2 and, what's going on? Where is this book going? So Krishna has widened our understanding, and that is the nature of bhakti. Love has no limitation, so how can compassion have limitation? The two are related. So our acharyas, our predecessors, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, they're always expanding compassion. And as their followers, we should also make that effort to live with increasing integrity, increasing care for all living entities. And let's not just choose the convenient path, as you see the nations of today doing when it comes to global warming, environmentalism. No, If we can't cut back our growth, it's very inconvenient. Let the other countries do that. So similarly, in our daily life, practicing bhakti, we should always be looking for aspects in which our compassion can increase. All right, 10, 20 years ago we may have lived a certain way, but now we are more mature. How can we live in a better way? This is what makes bhakti exciting and captivating. So I thank you for your kind attention. Take a few minutes for questions. Okay, do we have a microphone? You can pick out.
Prabhuji, is it true that vegetarians have problem with B12 and what? B12? Is it true that vegetarians have a problem with B12 vitamin?
With B12. You have to know how to eat properly. And if you really have a problem eating properly, which you shouldn't if you're staying in one place in your home, you can balance your diet in such a way that there's no vitamin B12 problem. But in the case of someone like me who travels, I take B12 supplements because as a traveling sannyasi, I can't, tell householders, was there enough B12 in that lunch?
What foods have B12?
I'm not a nutritionist. Any other questions?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Behind you. So, behind you. Hare Krishna. So, I have a question regarding silk. We see Srila Prabhupada wear silk. You're wearing silk, I'm wearing silk. We know that Srila Prabhupada, you would deny receiving leather shoes or what have you, yet you would wear silk. So how do we explain to those, that audience that you're so connected with, as you were saying, in terms of animal rights and what have you, you're wearing silk, that's ahimsa.
This world is such that there's always some contamination. We're not naive. At the same time, when you talk about cows, Krishna's favorite pet. In fact, in Bhagavatam, Prabhupada writes that when he's commenting on the verse, Namo Brahmanya Deva, Go Brahmanya Tayata, Krishna's a well-wisher to the cows and the brahmanas. He says actually Krishna likes the cows better than the brahmanas. So therefore, that's a wonderful place to start. You won't find anything in this world that's completely pure. But we're focusing in this presentation upon cows because this is Gita Nagari and cows are very special living entities. But we're not denying that this world is full of pitfalls and complexities. At the same time, we're looking out for Krishna's topmost interest first, and then we'll gradually work down the list.
Lecture. I just noted one point which you said in the beginning of the class, that bhakti is about giving priority, and on the other side you said that bhakti is not about excluding everything. So I was just thinking that how can one be exclusively devoted to bhakti if Like we have to prioritize our life also and don't have to leave everything.
Balance. Krishna talks about balance in Bhagavad Gita. Yadaya dahi dharmasya glanir bhavati bhavati. Dharmasya glanir. That means that when Krishna sees an imbalance in material and spiritual affairs, then he comes. In other words, there's a proper prioritization that should be given to your body, and there's a proper prioritization that should be given to the spirit soul. One doesn't cancel out the other. Therefore, bhakti requires guidance. Shesha Prabhu and his wife will be preparing a course in the balance. And so we look forward to that. They'll be traveling the world presenting that curriculum.
How many more questions?
It's up to you. You are the boss.
So, maybe we'll take one or two more. Maharaj, you answered it partly. Mataji was asking similar thing. You've got on one side, you've got the Paramahamsas with no interest or involvement in the material world. And then you've got the beginner, just maybe putting down that hamburger for the first time, understanding about the greater scheme of things, the spiritual as opposed to just complete material vision. So we find ourselves, most of us, somewhere in the middle. We're engaged in Bhakti Yoga, Sadhana Bhakti, and we are trying for pure Bhakti, but maybe not having attained it yet. We have a lot of other these considerations, such as you use this very accessible milk example. And then you also have environment, or maybe politics. Maybe one politician might be more favorable for distribution of transcendental understanding than another. My question is, how far do we go into it? Do we just stick to our ashram and our pure bhakti? We've got our bhagavatams and our bead bags. But our grihastha involvement takes us into the world. How do we make proper decisions and discrimination and remain unsullied?
Why is it that only the Grihastha's ashram takes them into the world? We're all living in this world, and we interact with the world according to our ashram style, but we're all within this world. I was just listening to, as always, Ramnath Swami described his meeting with so many important dignitaries of this world. So, we're not thinking that bhakti is a cloistered, sheltered, impractical experience. The more our Krishna consciousness increases, the more we see opportunity for engaging the world in Krishna's service. But that takes maturity. So it's all about gradually developing. And so we may start off as a beginner, as an infant in spiritual life, coping with certain things, like, as you say, putting aside the hamburger. And then as we grow spiritually, we start to have a deeper vision of how we can deal with the world in a better Krishna conscious way. So we're always trying to increase. That's what makes bhakti exciting. But there's no way that we can say a beginner will have the same vision as someone who is more mature in their spiritual life. But if there's sufficient guidance for everyone and inspiration, then the growth process can be accelerated. So I don't want to hold up the schedule because we have better things to come. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Questions and answers, which is something we really encourage all of us to do more. But maybe lecture at the next